Thank you so much for tuning in. In each episode, we are going to have a candid conversation with the speaker who's going to share their story. My next speaker is a mechanical engineer by profession and is currently a technical sales specialist at PTC and pursuing part-time MBA at ChicagoBooth. Let's see how his life took a turn and how he reached from being an engineer to doing MBA at one of the top schools. Thank you so much, Sydney, for meeting with me. I think it was fun having the off-the-record conversation about things that are happening around us. So I did some thinking about like how you did your bachelor's in mechanical engineering. So you were an engineer and then you moved towards business side of things and you became a technical sales specialist. So how did that transition happen from engineering to sales side of things?
Okay, that's it's interesting because it all kind of started back in college. Like I went into engineering because after I graduated high school and stuff, I didn't know what major I wanted to do. But I figured I'm good at math and science. Why not just pick something really hard, and then that way once I figure out what I want to do, I could always switch over to something easier rather than switching to something harder. But then what had happened was I started taking a bunch of econ classes back in the middle of my junior year. And then I discovered I really like econ. It was way more interesting. I didn't need to study as much. Maybe that was why I liked it. And things came more naturally, but it just felt a lot more fun. And at the time, I didn't want to waste all I've studied already in engineering. So I decided, you know what, I'm just going to go ahead and finish my engineering degree. And then in the future, I can always switch over to business or maybe get an MBA. But then what I discovered quickly right after is that once you kind of go down a certain career path, you kind of start getting sucked into it and ingrained in that path. So I was working as an engineer for about a year at this startup over in China, actually. And then I came back to the US and then I kind of opened up my own company, selling the product I just went and helped them design. But then that kind of failed after about a year and I gave that up and then went back into engineering for this I want to say a HVAC company. But then shortly after, while I was doing that, I was, didn't really like it. I realized, engineering is not really for me. So I started looking for new jobs. And then that's when I got approached by my current company. And it was kind of a good fit because it's an engineering software company and I'm an engineer, but they're looking for someone that's technical, but that's interested in the business side of things. And if you think about it, you're looking for an engineer that likes to deal with people. It's kind of almost an oxymoron.
That's actually nice. The engineer who likes to deal with people. And it's a very nice amalgamation of technical acumen and business acumen.
Yep.
That's nice. So how did you decide? I know you've been in this role for almost 5 years. So how did you decide of pursuing MBA? What was, you said, what was the motivation behind it?
Well, like I mentioned before, in college, I've always kind of thought about it. It's always been something I wanted to do since, I knew that engineering wasn't for me. And in the field, when I'm working, I want to do something that's more business oriented. And, as I mentioned, before my switch to this current job, while I was looking for new jobs and stuff, I was also taking my GMATs at that time.
Okay.
And, I took my GMATs, I got my grades and then I got this job. And because I got a new job, it was okay, well, I kind of put the thoughts of business school to the side. But then as I started doing the job more, I kind of got deeper ingrained into the technical sales path. And it seemed harder to branch out and switch over to another role or function. And, my GMAT score was actually expiring. So I decided, you know what? It's now or never. I either got to go take the leap and go to school and then hopefully transition my career, or I'm probably just going to, be in this position and kind of get into that rut that a lot of people may experience.
Nice. So tell me one thing. So I think I had the same question when I was figuring out whether I should do part-time MBA or full-time or regular MBA. Did you have that? Were you in that dilemma ever? Like you were trying to figure out whether you should go with regular or full-time MBA or part-time MBA?
I did. I was actually very tactical about it. So originally, I think I've always kind of thought about just doing a full-time because that's like the traditional thing that you think about when you say that you're going to go and do an MBA. And I think one of the biggest things about, or the biggest downsides about like doing a full-time MBA that people talk about is the opportunity cost. Like you're not working, and then you need to take like essentially like a pause for 2 years of your life just to go to school. And I was trying to decide, like, what are some of the most important things about the MBA that I'm looking for? Like for me, like the knowledge part was important, but I always felt like you can kind of learn from a lot of different sources. You can read different books. And I think for me, what was really valuable was the network. I think that's one thing I've always kind of underappreciated and didn't really take as much advantage of. But especially once now that I am in school, I've noticed that the power of the network is very powerful. And it's one thing that I think very successful people in the world understand really well, whereas very average people tend to overlook and underestimate. So because of that, I wanted to make sure that I got into like a really good program, like one of the top 10 programs. But in order to do that, I wanted to de-risk the chances that I wouldn't be able to make it into one, while also reducing the cost, like the opportunity cost of pursuing one. So that's kind of what led me to decide, like, what, maybe the part-time MBA is a good fit for me. And what also helps out is also the fact that, I have a job where I work remotely most of the time. So I have a bit of that flexibility of like when to work and then being able to juggle my work along with the school.
Actually, to be honest, I agree with you. Even I am realizing the power of ChicagoBooth's network, like how powerful it is. Like you just reach out to your alumni network, and they're always there to help you out, which is amazing.
Yeah.
So let me so how did you prepare for ChicagoBooth? Like, was there something different that you did, or was ChicagoBooth always your top choice when you were looking at schools?
It's actually funny. For the longest time, I used to say that Wharton was like my top choice. I used to live in Philly for a few years, and I was very determined to try to go to UPenn for business school. But then, when I started looking more into the different programs that are available and making that decision between the full-time and a part-time program, there aren't many schools, like great schools, that offer the part-time program. I think it was like UChicago, Northwestern, Berkeley, and then like NYU. And for me, like I am from the New York area, and NYU seems like a better fit. But it wasn't top 10, or at least not consistently. And B, I felt like the network for NYU was very limited in New York. Like you were stuck in New York if you went to that school, because that's where most people decide to stay. It's like you go to New York for school, you kind of love it, and then you never leave the city. And for me, it's like I was born in New York, and I wanted to kind of not be stuck there. So that's why I decided I needed to go somewhere else.
I agree. Yeah, I think the kind of program and the kind of flexibility that ChicagoBooth gives you is, I haven't seen that in other schools, especially like in UC Berkeley and Northwestern. So now you've been in ChicagoBooth for almost a year now. You're also one of the chairs for Public Speaking Club, and you're also the chair or leading the SAC Club. So tell me something about like how clubs at ChicagoBooth have helped your journey at ChicagoBooth. Or would you recommend someone who's joining ChicagoBooth to get themselves immersed in club activities?
Oh yeah, I mean, I highly recommend that. So just a little more about the value I got out of it. Like back in college, believe it or not, I was not the best student.
Okay, hard to believe.
Yeah, I didn't, I wasn't like very studious. I didn't always attend my classes. and I wasn't as active in clubs and stuff as I like to be. And for me, it wasn't that much of a problem. Like, I didn't have a hard time, like, understanding concepts and doing well in classes. But the things that you learn in classes are very academic. And then when you start, participating in a club or doing something for a club, you have, let's say, these goals or these priorities, and then the way of executing on it, there isn't really, like, it's not really something you learn from a textbook. I feel like everyone is kind of just learning it by doing it, and then you kind of practice it. So what I've learned about, participating in clubs, in the various clubs that we have, is that there's kind of like different dynamics of working with people. And a lot of that, I think, translates really well into, like, work in a real company and stuff. Like, I think a perfect example of that is, as part of, like, the chair for the cohorts, it's my responsibility to try to foster, like, the sense of community amongst each of the individual cohorts, so that people, feel connected with each other, not just with the school. And what's difficult about it is, one of the main ways that we go about doing that is to try to set up, like, what we call a party planning committee, or this group of core people that try to set up events and host events for people to do things together with. But if you think about the value of that group, it has to be self-driven. It has to be, like, more organic. It can't be like, I go and set up an event, because if I always keep doing that, once I leave, then they'll never want to hang out with each other anymore. And so what we try to do is we try to motivate, each of the individual cohorts to form this group. And then we try to motivate that group to try to do things together and try to take on that mission that we have and instill it in them, so that they will go and try to host these events. And if you think about how a company works, or, what a CEO does, it's kind of the same thing. It's like, a CEO has a vision, he has a mission, but he can't just command people and tell people to do it, and he can't do the job of everybody. He has to try to sell that vision to others, so that they will want to go and carry out the duties necessary to bring that vision to life.
Yeah, you know what that reminds me of? So yesterday I was having a conversation with someone, and they told me that, what is leadership? Leadership is when you're influencing people without authority, and that's exactly what you're learning to do. Like, you are influencing people to carry on with the mission, even when you're not there. So that is a perfect example of developing the leadership skill set, even in a school setup, which is amazing. So
Yeah.
So, I mean, I've had people who come up to me and ask me that, hey, how are you able to manage work, school, clubs, activities, assignments at the same time? Is it tough, or are you able to manage it? Is there something that you want to share, any tips or tricks that you've learned in the last 1 year on how to manage time management, basically?
Yeah. I'll tell you this. It is difficult. Like, it's very difficult, but it's doable. I think if I had to boil it all down to one word, I think it comes down to self-control. And I say that as someone, like, there has been times in my life where I may not have been as busy, and I can go on my phone, like, maybe I'll check Facebook or something, and then an hour will go by, and I'm just like, wow, I just been on my phone for an hour. What I notice about, like, when I'm trying to balance work and school, it's like, you have so little time in your day, and you have so much to do. So you have to be very, like conscious about what it is that you're doing with your time. And so if I need something done, right, like, maybe there's a reading I need to do, like, I may have the urge to want to finish it really fast, but I know I can't read something in, like, 30 minutes if it takes me 2 hours to read it. Like, I need 2 hours to read it. But then, I finish work at, let's say, 5 or 6, and then I need, like, maybe half an hour to eat dinner or something. And then, like, I want to get to bed at, like, let's say 10 or something. Then that only gives me, like, 3 hours. But then if I have, like, other stuff, I know that there's a finite amount of time I have. So what it comes down to is, making sure that you set you know how much time you need to do something, and you have the self-control to make sure that you adhere to it. Because once you miss, like, let's say a slot or something goes over, it becomes a domino effect, and then everything kind of falls apart.
Yeah, that is true. I think in the last 1 week, like I just have work and not school right now because school is starting next week. So I have so much of time that I'm amazed myself. Like I've never felt that I have so much of time because
I know.
there's no school activities to fill it with. But yeah, that's interesting.
It's so good.
Yeah, it makes you feel like, wow. I mean, I was able to manage time in a better way than I was doing it before joining school, which is amazing. So good.
Like, for me, I think it all depends on how much you try to load up too, right? Like I don't know if you've taken operations yet, but if you remember that concept of utilization, it's like if you're at, like, let's say 70% capacity, like maybe the lead time might be like a day, but if you're at like 100% utilization or 90% utilization, then it's like your lead time goes off the chart.
Yeah, that's true. And like also like how to have a timetable build up, like like you mentioned about operations. If you have varying inputs or varying demands, it can impact your output. It can, like I said, it's like a domino effect. So yeah, it makes total sense. So one last question that I have is, what are your aspirations after MBA? Like, have you thought about it? Something that you can share?
Yeah. This is something I'm still thinking about constantly and still trying to grasp. Originally, I wanted to come in because I wanted to pursue like a consulting role. And I wanted to pursue consulting specifically more so because of the different opportunities that it opens.
Yeah.
What I've come to learn about, like, I don't know if you've heard of ETA or how familiar you are with it, entrepreneurship through acquisition.
Yeah, I am.
That was always an idea, or let's say a dream that I've had. Like I always used to think that, I don't have like great ideas. Like I don't think I can just think of something and then create a company for it. But I do think that, I have a better like business sense than like some people. And I see a lot of businesses that are operating that just seems like they're poorly managed. And I feel like, I could easily come in and just do a better job than that. But I didn't think that anything like that existed. And then when I learned about the ETA route, it's like, oh, wow, that's exactly what it is, But then, with some nuances like fundraising and stuff.
Yeah. So actually, it's a very interesting point. Have you been involved with Polsky Center at ChicagoBooth?
I have a little bit.
Okay.
And I have been taking, like, I've recently took the ETA class. So that is a career path I am pursuing. But right now I'm kind of torn between that or consulting because the large part of it comes down to the risk. And I'm trying to de-risk, like, what happens if I pursue ETA and it fails? Like, what do I do then? I don't want to be stuck. Like, I don't want to have to like fall back to what I was doing before, which would be most likely this case where I have to maybe end up doing tech sales again. So what I'm trying to determine is like, do I maybe pursue consulting first and then pursue the ETA route, and then things go bad, I can always fall back onto consulting or the doors that consulting has opened, or do I just dive right in to ETA? Because I am confident in myself if it comes down to like being able to do well, but there is always that level of uncertainty. Yeah,
no, absolutely. And I think at least this is one thing that I have realized, that when I had entered into ChicagoBooth, I had no clue about entrepreneurship, and that was not even like top of mind for me. But as and when I started involving myself in Polsky's center and like activities that they do, and they kind of pushed me towards like venture side of things. Like we have so many competitions or even courses which are centered around entrepreneurship, like Spitzy is one of them. And we have so many others. So I think that is the beauty of going through an MBA, I guess, in ChicagoBooth, because it opens up many more doors for you that you might not even have thought about before. Yeah. And I think what's amazing about ChicagoBooth too is
there is no shortage of activities that you can pursue.
Yeah.
Like I know when I first started, like as I mentioned, like back in college, I didn't do a lot, but also to be honest with you, I don't think there was too much to do for me. But when I first started at Booth, I remember being all excited, like I'm going to try to do everything I can. And I've been trying to sign up for everything I can. And I feel like I'm only maybe doing like 10% of it, or like not even.
Yeah.
And my time is like all taken up by these activities.
Absolutely. I think there's just so many activities based on your interests that you can sign up for. And that happens like all the year round. It's not like only things happen only in summer or only in like during holidays or during break, which is amazing.
Yep.
All right. I think that concludes my conversation. But thank you so much, Sydney. I think I had fun. I had fun knowing about, how you were when you were back in high school and what kind of like prompted you to move towards economics. And okay, one last question, fun fact question. Who is your favorite professor so far at Chicago Booth?
Oh, my favorite professor so far.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I haven't thought too much about this. Off the top of my head, I will say one that has left a mark on me is probably like one of my first professors, Professor Gibbs.
Economics professor?
Yep. And the reason why I say him is because he gave me the sense of feeling of like insatiable curiosity. Like I remember when you talk to him, he's just fascinated with learning more about things, and he doesn't assume that things are the way they are. He always tries to understand things, and I think when you talk to him about it, you kind of get that sense, which I found refreshing because I don't think it's common to interact with people like that every day. So to me, that felt so boothy, and it's like, oh man, like I feel like I'm at the right place now.
Thank you so much, Sydney, for joining us. It was a pleasure having you with us today, and I hope you guys learned one or two things from Sydney's journey, from Sydney's life story. So stay tuned for next week's session, and we'll see you soon.